Still Standing. Wednesday Afternoons with Cari. A while back, I asked Cari's permission to document our journey after her death. "I totally trust you," she replied, and then she let loose her high-amplitude laugh and added, "I'm just kind of disappointed I won't get to see it." A year ago at this time, I was getting ready to meet Cari Leversey in person for the first, and as it turns out, last time. We had already been getting to know each other via 20 weekly video chat sessions since May. What I knew is that she had come close to dying from a brain tumor and sought me out as a companion in exploring and understanding herself more deeply. Why, she wondered, had she consciously chosen to walk to the brink of death and then, at the proverbial 11th hour, opt for a risky surgical intervention? What had called her back to life? And now that the surgery had severely impaired her physical functioning and left her with partial facial paralysis, major balance challenges, and a nervous system running constantly in emergency mode, what might she do to accommodate and make peace with, or understand and transform her plight? 1 hour at a time, 1 week at a time, on Wednesday afternoons, I got to know Cari. A Cari I have since learned was dramatically diminished, at least physically, from the ultra-competent, self-sufficient, laughing risk-taker who loved extreme outdoor adventures requiring strength, stamina, zest, and a gambler's nerves. There was, I hope, a grace for her in connecting to someone who could meet her exactly where she was and as she was, without comparison to past capacities and expectations. Without knowing who she had been before her dance with death, I could easily see that she was still a heroic figure on a courageous quest. The Cari I got to know was in many ways humbled by, but also surprisingly humorous about, her functional losses. She took responsibility for the reality she had created and was insatiably curious. Why? Why had she chosen this, and what could she learn? And she also firmly believed it lay within her power to transform and heal. I met Cari and her dear husband Richard in person for Thanksgiving 2016 with our mutual friend Linda English, who was responsible for connecting us. We gathered with friends and community and then withdrew to beautiful Lake Tahoe for a time of synchronizing in person, gazing eye to eye without computer screens between us, and exploring more questions. In person, Cari's personality was even more of a fierce and palpable energy, maybe a weather system, a moving storm front. I could not recall ever meeting such an intense and life-filled person, nor one who was so bluntly confrontive, a clear-eyed challenger, so restlessly curious, so endlessly full of sentences ending in question marks. I admit I was a bit intimidated by the sheer forcefulness of her personality. Never mind that she was allegedly diminished by her brush with death. This person was the living embodiment of the phrase, larger than life. By my reckoning, we have met weekly for the better part of a year and a half. Many friends do not get the privilege and challenge of that kind of incremental, disciplined, strategic contact. It was a digital odyssey that would not have been possible without Skype, which stands for Sky Peer-to-Peer, a rather perfect way of describing our high-flying peer support relationship forged with 1,300 miles of physical distance between us. For quite a while, we met on the beach, and Cari would send me photographs of the gorgeous vistas where she parked her car while connecting with me. Eventually, as her health and energy resources declined, we spoke to one another from our respective homes in California and Kansas, seemingly worlds away, and yet what emotional intimacy and spiritual knowing we established. Significantly, our high-tech bond encountered some unexpected turbulence in March, an upset that might have caused less courageous humans to withdraw. Instead, we stayed with the fear and discomfort, searching for the ancient patterns that had been called up for examination in the light of love. Abiding through this misunderstanding strengthened our relationship, first to ourselves and then to each other. As we did something on the order of an autopsy on our painful interactions, we got to the heart of the matter. The key question I asked myself in the aftermath turned out to be fruitful for both of us. How might this situation match and resonate with a past painful pattern? We both hung in there and confronted the answers that arose. Ultimately, the healing came in the form of empathy, first for ourselves and then for each other, which extended to other family members who had taught us the primal patterns that can still get activated in times of stress. I think we were both able to hold one another in better focus and on common level ground after that. There was more understanding and appreciation of each other's strengths and weaknesses. There was recognition of our shared experience of having others hold us at a distance, whether through awe or fear, when all we really wanted was to experience genuine closeness. There was, perhaps above all else, the assurance that no matter what, love would stay and carry the day. Your sheer forcefulness, intensity, and directness, I wrote to her recently as we reviewed our journey together, knocked at a closed door in my heart and challenged me to step out and meet my own misgivings. Even as our interactions triggered childhood fears and feelings of inadequacy, my love for myself and for you tipped the scales and kept me willing to stay vulnerable and confront my fears until I realized more of my own power and inner authority. I'm not sure where else I could have done this deep work of standing with my fears and allowing them to be transformed by love. Thank you. I had to smile at this part of her reply. I have scared people all my life. I finally came to realize that those who remained standing beside me were more than enough, the cream of the crop. Glad I got to be with you, Marva. At times it seemed possible that Cari would recover and return to the flow of living. She could feel herself falling in love with life in a new way, and more pertinently, with herself for the first time. Sometimes she was giddy with the possibilities. I could feel her yearning and reaching for vitality at the same time the tide of her health began turning. As recently as early August, she was excitedly fantasizing about building up her strength enough to operate a bicycle rickshaw business. Then one day she admitted, I think I'm dying. In the distilled focus of her conscious dying, Cari, a death doula herself and an advocate for death practice reform in the U.S., began harvesting insights at a prodigious rate. She came to understand that the trade-off for elongating her suffering was to have the privilege and the joy of completing her self-birthing before death. Along the way, especially as she chose to make her Facebook page public, and began sharing love letters to friends, family, and caregivers, she came into community in a new way, bringing her forgiveness, her self-love, and her growing inner peace as gifts to us all. As for the two of us, we continued our commitment to deep emotional work, continually focusing on the themes of trusting ourselves, dissolving obsolete messages of inadequacy, and choosing to stay connected when the path got a bit rocky. I'm so happy to witness you and me staying in love, wrote Cari, when I affirmed my commitment to navigating our challenges. That is where I choose to hold us firmly rooted. We've worked hard to find our way to being solidly grounded right here in the now. Death is a wonderful teacher. It asks, what have you done with your life? I find you a fine example of an answer to that question. I'm grateful for your mentorship. For the last several months, it has seemed imminent that Cari could die at any time. Some Wednesdays she missed our appointment, and I didn't know whether she was even alive. After Skyping with her during a brief hospital stay on her 56th birthday in September, a month went by before we met again. When I remarked on her extraordinary vigor and how little she seemed to have diminished in that time, she helped me understand. You are not talking to my body. You are talking to my mind. My body is totally declining. I don't know why I am not dead yet. Her fruitful assumption along the way has been that if she is alive, there must be something left to learn. In spite of all the love, she wrote a month ago, I'm still grappling with worthiness issues. It makes sense I'm still here, since being so affords me the opportunity to learn this lesson. I certainly have much space to relax into and surrender to the love and care that is waiting and available for me. For a person accustomed to confidently directing affairs, relying on her own competency, and helping to pull others along in the wake of her enthusiastic leadership, the last lesson seems to have been about learning not just to accept care, but to feel worthy of it, to lean back on the supports and let go. Surrender, of course, is always a requirement at the end of life. But just about the time I get the sense that she was relaxing into the numinous space between worlds, she'd surprise me with yet another scheme. I am in the middle of arranging my whole body deep sea green burial. It's going to be really cool, she told me one day. I had to laugh. Even in the throes of dying, Cari had a stout mental rope tied to the details. What Cari wanted to do is a feat rarely attempted or afforded in American death and dying practices. She wanted to be as conscious and in charge of the manner of care and after-death options as possible. Choosing to stay this conscious, I suspect, is exactly what makes surrender such an act of labor. Pushing, pausing, breathing, and then letting go of life itself. And my God, the mixed emotions there must be to be falling in love just when it's time to leave. Last Wednesday, I said goodbye. Cari wanted practice letting go. One of the last things she said to me was an encapsulation of what she felt she had learned during our 18-month walk together. Everyone who lives, she said, just needs to fall in love with themselves. It's impossible to weigh or measure the yield of Cari's spiritual harvest, or how that feeds a host of her family members and friends who've had a glimpse into her remarkably transparent, process. But surely this sweet, ripe fruit of self-love and forgiveness is as good a reason as any for sticking around, even if that involves physical suffering. This Wednesday afternoon, I ate an ice cream cone in a cemetery, leaning comfortably up against a headstone in the autumn sunlight during our regular appointment time, knowing Cari was still, as far as I knew, alive. We have always known and understood between ourselves that aliveness is a movable feast, that living and dying on our own clear term is a matter to be explored and celebrated, not feared or mourned. As far as I know, Cari is still alive as I write this. Maybe I'll send it to her so she can see herself through someone else's eyes. Maybe when she realizes how extraordinary, worthy, and beloved she really is, not for her doing or planning or competence, but simply because of her pure being. It'll be the perfect time for the final phase of self-birth, which will look like dying to everyone but Cari.